Welcome to the world of sewing. Our topic for this class is sewing terms. As a beginner, you need to know these sewing terms, which will surely give you an advantages when it comes to sewing. I hope this list of sewing terms will help you on your sewing journey and expand your knowledge of sewing and fashion. Understand beginning sewing terms. I want to look at sewing terms for a beginner. Now, when you learn to sew, you are introduced to a lot of new vocabulary words and phrases. Understanding these terms can be tricky. It can be really intimidating in so many ways. Words like bias and back stitches. You can't sew your project unless you understand them right. This beginner sewing dictionary is designed to walk you through some of these beginning sewing terms that might trip you up so that you can get to the fun parts, creating something fantastic. What are sewing terms? Sewing terms are exactly what it sounds like. That is the words and phrases used within the sewing word. And sewing terms means words and phrases that they are used within the sewing word. If you hear the word basic, you may think that we are talking about keeping a chicken or turkey most while cooking. However, in sewing circle, this word also means long loosened stitches that hold fabric temporarily in place. So you can see that the sewing terms that we use in sewing is different from the in the another word out there. So sewing terms are words or phrases used within the sewing word. We are starting off with basic sewing terms. In order to understand some basics rules of sewing, you need to know the basic sewing terms. Understanding this term will help you to read patterns, follow instruction, and talks about what you are doing with a better vocabulary. So here are few sewing phrases that will help you to learn to sew. Okay, we are starting with back stitches. That is under basic sewing terms. We say back stitching is a process of sewing backward over the loose thread at the beginning of a stitch in order to secure your stitch, and this is done at the beginning and the end of a stitch and whenever the thread is broken. Seam, which we have done before, seam is a line where two pieces of fabric are sewn together. Then seam allowance, that is the fabric between the edge and the seam. That's what we mean by seam allowance. You can see from the image there, that is the fabric between the edge and the seam. The seam may be different depending, that is the seam allowance may be different depending on the types of fabric to use. So we also have Hem is the edge of the fabric that has been folded and sewn under. That is in order to keep the raw edges of the material from unraveled or being sewn. That's what we mean by hem. Then we have lining. Lining is an inner layers of the fabric underneath a garment. We have that is a wedged shaped fold used to shape sewing pattern in order to make a garment fit better, which you can just see from the image there. It is typically used at the bust and the waist. We also have quilting. Quilting is stitching two layers of a fabric together with a layer of feeding in between a consistent pattern. So you can see it is stitching two layers of a fabric together with a layer of feeding in between in a consistent pattern. Sewing terms, that is, we are looking at sewing term in terms of fabric types. So we are looking at sewing terms in terms of fabric types now. Now you cannot sew without fabric. We know that is, you cannot sew without material. You will want to get to know all the different kind of material available to you. So that is why we are looking at the sewing terms in terms of a fabric. To kick off with the fabric types, we are starting with wrapped, that is the thread that runs the length of a woven fabric. You can see it up and down. Then we have what we call width. That one is the thread runs at the right angles to the length of a woven fabric, otherwise known as a cross grain. Also, we have fabric grain. Now, this one is the orientation of a fiber woven or knit together. That is joining together of a woven or knit together to create a fabric. The grain creates lines that run parallel and perpendicular to the stiff edge. You can check them from our image there. More so on fabric type, we have sleeve edge. We have what we call sleeve edge. That is the edge of a raw fabric that runs along the edge of the grain. Fabric has a stiff edge so that it does not fray before it is sewed. Then we have hand. Hand is a term that they use to describe the textures or feel of a certain fabric. We have bias. Now this bias is a diagonal cross grain of the fabric at the 45 degree. It is where there is the most stretch. You can find where there is most stretch there. They use it for stretch material. That is what we call bias. Sewing word and the phrases. We are looking more on sewing words and phrases. Now, the art and practice of sewing come with a huge vocabulary, like you can find now. There are many different kinds of sewing tools, stitches, elements, and techniques that is associated with sewing. We are going to take a look at more words and phrases to help you more. Let's start with embroidery. Okay, let's start with the embroidery. I'm sure you have heard the word embroidery. Embroidery is a hand sewing technique used to decorate a fabric with a needle-made design. Colorful thread is generally used. So that's what they use. We call embroidery. Then we have faces. We have faces. Faces. As you can see this on a neckline on a or armhole. That is where you can find the faces. You can check the image there. Now, faces is an extra layers of material sewn to the inside edge of a piece of clothing to make it stronger. So that's what we mean by faces. When you see something like that at the neckline, they call them faces. Then we have ruche. Now, ruche is a girdle, ruffle, or plait of a fabric used for trimming or decorating garments. That is to gather fabric in a repeating pattern to make such a plait or ruffles. So that's what we mean by ruche. We're still more on words and phrases. We have what we call girdle. We have the girdle. Girdle is created by running a thread along the fabric and then you squish the fabric together along the thread. So that's what we mean by girdle. Then we have plaits. Plaits is a fold created by doubling the fabric over itself and stitching it together. That is that one. Then we also have sewing lotion. Now, sewing lotion is an item that is sewn or attached to a finished sewing project, such as button or snap. We have yoke. Yoke is a design element of the top or part of a garment to fit over the body. So that's what we mean by yoke. When you see yoke, we're not talking of egg. It's a design element at the top or top of a garment to fit over the body. We have cord. Cord. Cord is seams in a fancy cotton and sometimes Xmas decoration. A cord is made of a twisted fabric. It could be thick or narrow depending on the use. We have darning. Now, darning is a technique for repairing holes in a fabric by hand using only a needle and thread. Dripping. Dripping creates new garments by dripping or pinning fabric in a dress form. Dripping creates a three-dimension representation of your ideas and allow you to see how a fabric will hang on a person. So it creates what a three-dimensional representation of your ideas and allow you to see how a fabric will hang on a person. Seam ripper. Seam ripper is a small tool with a pointed edge used to remove stitches from a piece of a fabric. That's what they use it. You used to see it. It's like a pin. A seam ripper is a small tool with a pointed edge. We used it to remove stitches from a piece of fabric. Zigzag. Zigzag is a stretchable sewing machine stitch that runs diagonal back and forth. That is zigzag. Then we have what we call ease. To ease a pattern of pieces means to adjust a longer edge of a fabric to a slightly shorter one in such a way that the girdle or the plaits are not obviously. So ease can also refer to the amount a garment is larger than your body. So you want to ease it when it's big. So when we ease, we mean what? To adjust the longer edge of a fabric to a slightly short one in such a way that the girdle or the plaits are not obvious. So that is all on the sewing words and phrases. I hope all this one that we've learned today will really help you in a long way. Wow, that is the end for today. Thank you for listening. Hope this sewing vocabulary lesson will help you to understand some of the basic sewing terms and phrases. If you learn them and use them often, you will sound like an old sewing profession in no time. Knowing these sewing terms will surely put you at the advantages when it comes to sewing. I hope this list of sewing terms will prepare you with the knowledge you need to pursue this beautiful craft and become great at it. If you have a friend who are hesitating to enter the world of sewing because of the unfamiliar language, show them the sewing terms list and then you can all learn together. Till then, keep learning. Bye.